Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Two federal judges, one in California, one in Maryland, on Thursday ordered 19 federal agencies to rehire some 20,000 probationary workers who'd recently been fired as part of President Trump and Elon Musk's massive government layoffs. The pair have also been blocked from further axing those agencies, including the Education Department, which announced this week it was reducing its workforce by roughly one-half. The measures provide some temporary relief as labor groups, Democratic attorneys general, and others challenge the White House's attempt to dismantle the federal government. Separately, on Thursday, another federal judge ordered Elon Musk and the so-called Department of Government Efficiency to hand over documents related to Doge's operations. The case was brought by 14 Democratic attorneys general and argues Doge has been unconstitutionally ordering the mass federal layoffs. In a surprise turnabout, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer announced he's voting for a Republican measure to keep the government funded, splitting from the majority of the Democratic caucus, which had been poised to block the bill. Schumer argued that letting the government shut down would cause even more harm to people and give free rein to President Trump and Elon Musk to further dismantle federal agencies. Most Democrats say the continuing resolution would also be a blank check for the White House and will defund essential food, education, and health care programs. It's not clear yet which other Democrats will support Schumer's move, other than Senator John Fetterman, who had already announced he would vote in favor of the funding package. At least 8 Democrats need to back the measure alongside Republicans for it to pass. The news left many House Democrats incensed, including New York Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's been calling on her supporters to ramp up public pressure on Democrats to vote down the bill. She addressed reporters from a Democratic policy retreat in Leesburg, Virginia.
Just to see Senate Democrats even consider acquiescing to Elon Musk, I think it is a huge slap in the face, and I think that there's a wide sense of betrayal.
Meanwhile, young students, parents, and teachers from D.C. schools rallied at Senate offices Thursday to speak out against the spending measure, which they warn will trigger a devastating $1 billion cut to education and other services in the Capitol. Here in New York, police arrested some 100 protesters as the group Jewish Voice for Peace led a major sit-in protest inside Trump Tower to call for the release of detained Palestinian activist, recent Columbia University graduate Mahmoud Khalil. Those arrested include Jewish elders, descendants of Holocaust survivors, and students. Demonstrators donned red T-shirts with the message, "Jews say stop arming Israel," as they took over the lobby of the Manhattan skyscraper. This is Nate Cohen, a member of Jewish Voice for Peace, speaking outside Trump Tower.
We know that fascist regimes try these things. They test these cases. They try to see if people will comply, if people will roll over and allow them to force this kind of illegal, undemocratic activity on us. And we believe that it's deeply important to stand up in these kinds of moments, to say that we will not sit idly by, we will not comply. Never again means right now, never again means for everyone. What happened to Mahmoud should never have happened, and we're not going to let it happen to anyone else.
We'll go to that protest where President Trump first announced his candidacy in 2015 after headlines. Also Thursday, the Council on American Islamic Relations filed a new lawsuit on behalf of Mahmoud Khalil and other Columbia students against Columbia University and a U.S. House committee for respectively disclosing and requesting student records. A lawyer for CARE said, quote, "No student should fear that their private information will be handed over to politicians who seek to punish advocacy for Palestinian human rights," unquote. This all came as Columbia announced it had expelled, suspended, and revoked the diplomas of a number of students who took part in a campus anti-war protest last spring. The protest saw students take over a school building and rename it Hinds Hall in honor of Hind Rajab, a 6-year-old girl killed by Israeli soldiers in Gaza, along with her family. Also on Thursday, the Trump administration issued a letter to Colombia demanding a list of immediate next steps in order to open discussions on restoring $400 million in government funding that was rescinded less than a week ago. The steps include banning face masks, ramping up its law enforcement authority, and placing the Middle East, South Asian, and African Studies Department under academic receivership or external oversight. In other related news, Harvard law students overwhelmingly passed a referendum calling on Harvard to divest its more than $50 billion endowment from, quote, weapons, surveillance technology, and other companies aiding violations of international humanitarian law, including Israel's genocide in Gaza and its ongoing illegal occupation of Palestine, unquote. Moscow said President Trump and Putin will discuss on the phone a possible 30-day ceasefire in Russia's war on Ukraine, following Russian talks with the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. On Thursday, Vladimir Putin signaled he's open to a truce proposal as he listed a series of conditions and concerns around ending the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
But who will give orders to cease hostilities? And what will be the price of such orders? Do you imagine almost 2,000 kilometers of front line? Who will figure out who and when in the field of 2,000 kilometers had broken the ceasefire? And then who will blame who in violation of this agreement?
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Putin of manipulation, explaining, quote, Putin often does this. He does not say no directly, but he does it in such a way that only delays and makes normal decisions impossible, unquote. NBC News is reporting President Trump has directed the Pentagon to develop proposals to advance his threats to seize the Panama Canal. The U.S. Southern Command's reportedly drafting potential plans to increase U.S. military presence in Panama and partner more closely with Panamanian forces in an attempt to diminish China's influence and cut off its access to ports in the Panama Canal. NBC News report is based on the accounts of two U.S. officials. Panamanian officials responded saying, quote, our sovereignty over the Panama Canal is absolute and not the basis of any negotiation, unquote. The Panama Canal Authority is run entirely by the Panamanian government, not China, as Trump has falsely claimed. Meanwhile, Trump was asked about his threats to annex Greenland during an Oval Office meeting with the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte. Trump's reply, quote, I think it will happen, unquote. During their meeting, Rutte praised Trump and vowed to keep rallying NATO members to increase military spending. Syria's transitional president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, signed a temporary constitution Thursday, declared the start of a new history for Syria. Ahmed al-Sharaa, who led the rebel offensive that toppled Bashar al-Assad in December, said the new constitution maintains Islamic law and that the head of the state must be Muslim, as well as enshrining rights of women, the press, and freedom of expression. The document signing came as Israel launched airstrikes on the capital, Damascus. Israel's defense minister has threatened to occupy parts of Syria for an unlimited period after deploying its troops following Assad's fall. Meanwhile, the UN warns entire families have been killed in recent sectarian attacks in Syria's coastal region, which is home to the Alawite community. Many have fled across the border to Lebanon, seeking safety.
We stayed at home. We didn't go out. We didn't even stand in front of the windows. We shut the curtains, and we didn't go out at all. All the doors were locked, but we haven't slept for 3 nights. Gunshots, a lot of them, a lot of gunshots. We're not accustomed to that. May God help us.
Argentina's far-right security minister is facing mounting calls to resign over the violent police response to a protest against President Javier Milei's austerity measures and worsening poverty. Over 1,000 riot police were deployed to the streets of Buenos Aires Wednesday in an attempt to crack down on protesters who were tear-gassed and shot with rubber bullets and water cannons. A photographer was left in a coma. Recent protests have been led by retirees who are demanding secure pensions and access to free medications. Cuba's released 553 prisoners despite the collapse of an agreement with the United States that would have seen the easing of sanctions on the island. The deal with the Biden administration was brokered by the Vatican and came to light in January when President Biden announced he'd lift the state sponsor of terrorism designation for Cuba. The measure was quickly reversed by Trump after his inauguration. In related news, the Trump administration's reportedly considering including Cuba and Haiti on a list of countries that could be subjected to a sweeping new travel ban. In other immigration news, the Trump administration's resumed placing asylum-seeking families in detention, restarting a practice that caused the death of at least 6 migrant children during Trump's first term. The nonprofit group Raíces is reporting at least 14 immigrant families, some with children as young as a year old, are currently jailed at a facility in Karnes County, Texas, after being apprehended near the Mexican-Canadian borders. The families are from Colombia, Romania, Iran, Angola, Russia, Armenia, Turkey, and Brazil. Family detention had been largely suspended, though not abolished, under the Biden administration. The facility where the families are being held is run by the private company Geo Group, which has been repeatedly accused of abuse, including medical neglect. This comes as the Justice Department has dropped a Biden-era sexual abuse lawsuit against Southwest Key, the largest provider of housing for unaccompanied immigrant children. The move comes after the Health and Human Services Department said it had stopped contracting Southwest Key services. Survivors of abuse said workers forced children to perform sexual acts and pose for nude photos while threatening them with retaliation. And longtime Democratic Congressmember Raul Grijalva died Thursday from complications from cancer treatment. For decades, Grijalva represented Arizona's 7th congressional district, a vast border region that included his hometown of Tucson. He was a leading progressive voice who championed immigrant rights and environmental justice. Grijalva was the longest-serving co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Grijalva's father immigrated from Mexico through the Bracero program, which allowed agricultural workers to temporarily come to the U.S. between the early 40s and 60s. Democracy Now! Spoke to Congressmember Grijalva in 2017, just days before Trump was inaugurated for his first term.
When the public comes into the discussion, when they are part of it, when they put that kind of pressure on. And that's part of the strategy that I think going forward is so important. Those of us that are in Congress that are opposed to what's going on are a voice. But the real power in holding back some of the worst instincts of Trump and the majority in the House and in the Senate is going to come from people themselves.
Arizona will have to hold special elections to pick Raul Grijalva's successor. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.